All right. Good morning. How is everyone? Happy to be here. I'm a little tired today. Ooh, getting ready for quilt market. Yeah, there's a lot going on. But we're about to launch the Fabric Line Pottery. There's that project that I posted to YouTube last time for the fabric wrap letters, which is kind of a fun craft project, especially if you do it with kids, spell their name, put it in a little frame. I think that's super fun. So we are about to launch this thing. And so for those of you who can't be with us at Quilt Market, I kind of wanted to walk you through the line and give you a little bit of background as far as not only my inspiration, but kind of how I see some of the fabrics being used. So we got this lookbook. Ooh, wow. That's me looking all manly on the front. Ooh, yeah. Ooh. I know I'm ridiculous. That's totally fine. But it has some great examples in here of the quilts that we used with this fabric line. And so a lot of this video is going to be kind of either split screen, or I'm going to be putting in images so that you can see them more close up rather than me holding them up to the screen. Okay, so we're good with that. I will walk you through. So this is this is what sales reps use to take it around from shop to shop and take orders. So I'm going to walk you through from the very beginning. Now, the very first design that I did for the entire line was a design called Paint, right? It's called pottery because I was very much inspired by the things that we had around the house, me growing up in the 70s in Canada. And one of the things that we had was a lot of pottery, and I was really intrigued by the natural crackling and patina that happens with a lot of pottery. So that was originally where the inspiration came from, right? So that first design that I did was to simulate essentially that crackle, right? Get that design into a fabric that I thought would be really cool and interesting to use, and the rest of the design essentially developed from there. After I did the paint, what's called the paint design, that's the crackle, that was the first one. And then from there, I went on to do this design called smudge. All right, and I'll show you a picture of that. And smudge was essentially done kind of as a bolder, thicker way of doing crackle, right? And I kind of saw this as more of a texture almost, same with paint, right? As a texture. And so I was having fun kind of playing with that and kind of getting this modeled kind of look to fabric. And then from there, I did the smudge with circles, okay? And then that's where this actual quilt actually came from as well. A lot of the inspiration, you can see the circles and the negative space that I used in the actual fabric line as well. And that one I love a lot. I mean, I think it's a really cool pattern, and it comes in several different colors that were inspirational, 4 different colors to be exact, that I loved a lot. And so I'll show you those. And then from there, I just started playing with the circles and that whole idea, and came up with this little mini circle pattern that just kind of I put on to repeat, and I thought was extremely cool, and I loved the way that that turned out. And I also incorporated that one into this really beautiful green that I love a lot. So that one comes in a couple different colors as well. And then from there, just based off of that, I also wanted to have kind of a plaid, right? But I didn't want it to be a direct copy. So a lot of these times when I didn't know the actual name that I was going to be giving them. It was kind of a working name for me. And then Wyndham Fabrics kind of took it and ran with it. And I'm like, oh, I guess that's what it's called now. So, so some of the names are like, and you're like, that's not really what that is. And I'm like, well, it was kind of just my idea that I had at the time. So the plaid version is actually, like I said, I didn't want it to be like a direct ripoff of a plaid, but I want it to be plaid inspired because, again, like the whole wool plaid vibe from the 70s, I loved so much. And so I wanted to try and incorporate some of that. See, a lot of this was very much inspired by things we know. Right? I wanted it to be, okay, cool, but at still the same time, I wanted it to be high design, yet relatable. relatable in that this is something that we all know, this is something we all resonate with, this is all something that I hope that we have some memories of and are drawing our personal experience from into when we're looking at something like this. So that was important to me that we had kind of a plaid, and then from plaid I did this other one called strike, which is a really, not dumbed down, but yeah, like toned down, like version of the plaid. I only use certain aspects of the plaid in the design I called strike. And then from there, I also wanted to keep building on that. Ended up with a pattern we call herringbone, even though it's not really technically a herringbone. I was just kind of like, I just had that in my idea because of the way that the strong lines were, you know, intersecting like a herringbone, but this is a little different. Anyhow, so I loved that, and then with that one I really played with scale, and I really like blew it up quite large to get, you know, a closer, more visual, almost, you know, graphic design type of approach to those lines, so you could really see them and experience them. And then from there, I ended up doing the line work, which was just a bunch of lines, right, intersecting in a bunch of ways, and then continuing to repeat them almost like you would with a quilt block. All right, let's look at some of the collection in its various colors. So the first that I really started with was blue, right? Blue and gold to me has always been a great color combination that I love so much. So when I was doing the collection, I wanted to look at the blues and give people not only a bit of a range in terms of hues, right? Lighter to darker, right? And then this plaid, which I actually really love. For some reason, this particular fabric feels very, kind of Japanese to me, and I love it. I love the texture that it gives. It gives a nod towards a traditional plaid without being, you know, too deliberate, too exactly on the nose. So I love the sense that this fabric lends to the collection itself. And then beyond that, we have the grays and the darker tones, right? And so this half circle fabric, which I also love, is really interesting to me for that reason, that it lends in kind of a mid-gray, right? So again, you have grays, but in two different shades. So you have a lighter version and a darker version, and then you have the darkest color in the collection, which is, it looks black, but it's technically a dark brown with this little blue on it, which I think works in nicely when you need a fabric that gives a little more movement, like this one does. So I really enjoy this fabric as well. But these are kind of a sampling of the where I started from in terms of the blues and then the grays. And then let me show you how to kind of pair some of these, because especially the blues were very, very important to me. So again, starting from the blues, there's a couple different directions that we can go from here. The first thing that I really love is the addition of a green hue, right? When you add a green to these blues, I think it becomes kind of, I don't know, it has a an interesting feel to it, because blue and green are so close to each other in the color spectrum, right? So when you start adding in these greens to the blues, you can see kind of the direction that it starts to go, which is quite different than some of the others, say the brown that I'm going to add in next. But you can see how these would all work together, giving you a little bit of pop of color here with the yellow. But then these greens kind of blending in next to the blues to give you the really kind of sophisticated and cool, calming palette, which is what I love about this. And I think that men in general are attracted to calmer quilts. Ladies, guys are not gonna love your overly colorful, like splash on everything, paparazzi gone wild kind of quilts. Like we just, at least me personally, and I've seen lots of guys who do love that type of approach to a quilt, but men in general, I mean, look at men's clothes. They come in like 3 colors, right? They come in like brown, gray, and black. Okay, so let's be mindful of that as we're using men's fabrics for quilts, that we are being mindful of the types of colors that men are generally attracted to, which is dark and lights, not a lot of mid-tones, not a lot of, you know, so that's again part of the inspiration for this. So let's look at that. Starting from the blues, if we want to add in a little more color, right? My next kind of segue was not only adding a brown with a vibrant design, but not too much, right? It's just a little pop of something without going totally nuts. And then from there, we add in more blues and golds, continue to build on a theme, right? So now we've gone from the blues into more of a colorful effect, whereas the greens were a bit more toned down. This one is really starting to give us more vibrant color, especially as we get into this, which really, I mean, for most men, I think that this would be a lot of print, a lot of color for them, but it really works. In fact, this one and this one are in fact the same pattern, only this one has the stars, the gold stars overlaid over top of this one, which really intensifies the color. So I think that this is a really fun color palette as well to add into your blues. All right, so let's look at some of the browns now. Looking at this again, starting from the same blues, working our way into a transitional color, which is this blue and brown, which gets us into the browns. And we have this one, which is just a nice texture that'll add a little, you know, range to your work. And then same with this one, but only in a slightly darker tone. And then this one finally, which is kind of fun in that it's very traditional, kind of men's shirting kind of feel, but it has this pink line work in it, which I think is really super cool. And it's still strong and masculine, but it has just a touch of color to it, which I think is super cool. Then from there, you can work your way obviously back into this one we haven't seen yet. And this, by the way, this pattern here is supposed to be used as my stripe. That's the stripe in my collection. And I love it because it's kind of a two-way stripe going in two different directions, which is quite fun. And so that one I think is quite interesting to be used, especially in, say, a stop border, something like that, to give a little bit of a stripe effect. And then you can work your way back into the greens from the browns like so, all right? And that gives us kind of back into where we were before with the blues and greens. So you can see how that would work. Okay, now looking at the browns into golds. These browns transition really beautifully into these, which pick up more of a gold tone, right? So we go from more just plain brown to a brown with a real pattern to it, which is this half circle pattern, right? And I think that this is really gorgeous. I love this fabric so much. And I think the design and the colors are really cool, which then takes us into, say, this, which is a little bit of pattern, but again, not too much for men, just enough, strong, bold, very cool, these kind of stars that I think are great. And the colors work beautifully together with this, which leads me to my favorite fabric in the entire collection, which is this. If someone was to ask me as a designer, who am I? I'd bring this out. I love this brown and gold, kind of traditional, very Canadian feeling. This really is like me to a T, this kind of plaid texture. And I hope it's showing up on the camera okay, but I love, love, love this. So you can see how as a grouping that you get from these blues to these browns and golds really nicely. Okay, I think that's about it from here. I'm gonna add more golds and take out the blues. Moving on from, I took out the blues from the browns, right, through to the transitional ones, which bring us into the gold. And I believe that these golds are so interesting to me, especially the color combination of like that plaid I just showed you with more of this gold next to it. I think is really, really, really fun. So there's that into the golds. And then of course from the golds, you always have a transition piece, which can bring you, say, back into the blues, right? And then we end up back there where we were with some of these blues and golds, and you can see how that would work. All right, the next thing and the last thing is looking at the light, the off-white colors, which I call noble white. And I love this kind of plaid with a lot of these browns, I think is really great. There's this, which works so beautifully. When you pair it with red, this fabric is just gorgeous, and I think it's really fun for Christmas, actually. I don't know why, but it reminds me of that, especially when paired with red, like my line Leah. That's what I used in there. And then the other off-whites that we have are, hold on. All right, then the other off-whites that we have to go along with that is the line work, which I think is just very, very cool. And that one I think works well with the other colors as well. And then finally this off-white with the brown. You can see how that would go beautifully with some of these colors here as well. So that is pretty much my tour of my fabrics. Guys, I'm sweating to death just moving those bolts of fabric around. All right, just finally I wanted to show you this quilt up close a little bit so that you can see some of the pairings of what I think works really well together. Like I love, love, love this combo of this blue and the blue and gold, or this one, right? I think that just the way that you can put them together and mix and match them is really interesting to me. I'll just pan down, you can see the bottom part of it, right? And the way that those combinations go together, I think is pretty cool. So that is the collection, and I am super excited. You will not be able to buy it until April of 2020, but they are taking orders for quilt shops now at Quilt Market, and that's kind of the timing of it. You can always buy it online. You can just go to Wyndham Fabrics website and look me up in terms of the fabric line called Pottery, right? You just look at that and it'll take you right there. You can also search on their website, just type in the search bar Pottery and it'll come right up. So that's it. So thanks so much. I really appreciate your support as always. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can just hit the subscribe button right there. That would really help me out. And then also you can always email me at quiltingcowboy@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support. It means the world to me.